Good morning, everybody. Today my work is going to be about emergent materials, but how artists can carve their material properties to make new kinds of artistic work and interactive work. Despite the proliferation of all the different materials that contemporary artists are using nowadays, art critics usually don't raise the issue of matter when they are doing their critical work about these materials. And more of that, the artists usually don't know exactly what are the different emergent and new materials, except for some of them, which are the very well-known materials like piezoelectricity, for example, or shape memory alloys. But I do think that it's very important to understand what this kind of material, this new material, I call them the emergent materials, can do, and what are their properties, what is their structure inside them, and what are the laws which govern these kind of materials, because it really can enhance a lot all the possibility that the artist can get to make their artwork. It seems to me that even in contemporary art, no, it doesn't change, okay. Well, this very old couple of matter and form is very the founding principle of the philosophical theory. But as you know well, matter usually was not worthy of consideration in that kind of theories. And maybe that's why the art history is usually an history of forms. You know, for example, that for Plato, there is the ideal idea of form, which enjoy a higher stature because it was permanent and pure, and matter was just less important. But even for Aristotle, matter was indifferentiated element, some stuff out of which things were made, and so also form didn't enjoy the priority. In fact, in the mechanist idea, material is a stuff which is passive and that you can cut, you can give it a shape and assemble them, screw them, stick them together in order to build some objects, some engine, some buildings. And the very important thing was that you could have a material which can be homogeneous and stable in the time, with no change in color, no change in shape, and no change in volume. But nowadays, in the laboratories, we are elaborating different materials, which are very interesting also because they can change their shape by themselves, and they can act by themselves. So how can they do so? Of course, it's because of the chemical structure, but I really think that it's very important to take into account their internal structure, their internal form, I would say. And this is this internal structure that will make very strange, interesting, and powerful properties of these materials. So they are not amorphous at all to get these kind of properties. And I would say there is no more for me this old couple of matter and form, but now maybe we could say that matter is form. We're taking this word in another sense that the one we spoke about at the beginning of this talk. Form is here the structural, the internal structure of the material inside itself. So how can they be useful for the artist? Well, they can use that kind of materials that are smart materials. I prefer the term responsive materials because they are very sensitive to the surrounding all around them, and they respond to it in a very strong manner, for example, by changing their properties colors, capacity, sensibility, and so on, but in a very high intensity so that we can really see it. And it makes us sensible to the change in the environment. So we can say that there is a kind of intelligence in the hardware because of this structure. And what is very important is that it doesn't need some software, no digital devices, no sensors to capture the changement, to put it to give some digital information into electronic, which go to the computer with a software which say how to react. No, it's really the matter by itself which responds directly, and that's why it's very powerful. So in this matter, it's like in a mosaic, in fact. You have some parcels which can be very different shape, colors, and so on, but they belong to the same image of the wool. So it's a little bit like an architecture, internal architecture of the matter, as we could speak about cathedral architecture. But here, where some steps are going down to the depth of the material, the steps getting thinner and thinner until it reaches the size of the atoms. You can see there some atom of carbon, a little bit like the mosaic, as you see. It's in graphene, and it's organized around a defect. So it's really interesting to see this parallel between both of these. But it do not have to be really well ordered. It can be disordered, like here, where you can see some nanodomains, but indeed, nanodomains, things are oriented in the same direction. So what are the different properties that we can get with this kind of structures in the material? I think all of you know that kind of metamaterials, which are very strange material, thanks to their particular structure and substructure inside the matter. It can run some object invisible by deflecting the waves. In this example, it's deflecting the acoustic waves, but it can also, with other substructure, deflect the light waves or deflect seismic waves, and so on. So it's very amazing. You can have also that kind of structure, 4D printed by Skylar Tibbits. Here you have a material with B layers. With one of the layers, we can swell with the water, and the other one not. So it's moving when you lower the structure under the water. One part is swelling, and the structure is changing its shape by itself. Here another example where you can change the property of the surface. You can make it repellent to water by structuring the surface with a lot of little pillars, microscopic pillars, so that the drop of water cannot get all around the pillars. And so the surface becomes strongly repellent to water. It's called the Fakir effect because of these little pillars, or the Lotus effect. Again, a property driven by the microstructure. And in fact, this microstructure can be really relevant at all different size scales, the atomic size scales, but also mesoscopic or macroscopic size scales. And very often scientists are getting their inspiration from the nature, because the nature has produced some very clever structure, getting better and better with ages. And we can see in this example the gecko, where on the feet, here you have a lot of little lamellar structures, but at the end of the lamellar structures you have substructures, And on these substructures, you have other ones again. And this make the possibility for the gecko to, when he put his feet on the wall, that the little structure can go very close to the atoms and benefits of the van der Waals forces. So it can climb on the walls just because this microstructure, special microstructure. So the biomimicry can give lots of ideas to the scientists. But now, what can artists do with that kind of emergent materials? Well, they can do interactive installations. So in that case, with these new materials, I would say responsive installations, but without any digital technology, which is very interesting. Here an example. So here you can see mobile sculpture of Etienne Krahenbuhl. And in this sculpture is using the super-elasticity of a shape memory alloy that is combining with rusty steel and iron. And so it gives to this very large structure, very heavy structure, there is a sentiment of simplicity and like a kind of behavior, like if it was breathing when the wind is passing through it. And the sound also is very nice, thanks to this kind of movement. Here, Dan Rosengard have stages also that kind of shape memory alloys. In that cathedral, where you can see Lotus Dome, which is quite a kind of physiological system with like a skin all around it. And in that sculpture, the little feet are folding themselves when you come close to the structure. And the light at that moment goes through the structure, from the inside of the structure, the intimacy, to the outside. And it's a very powerful sensation that you can have when you get through to it, especially because it's that kind of cathedral all around it. It's like a very strong spirit that's emerging from the inside of the structure to the outside. And again, you can see that it's really like a living structure, like this sensitive plant, for example, which really have a communication with the people who come close to it. Here, some other physical forces which are used, the hydrophobic and hydrophilic forces that I have used in this fogging installation. You can see the fog drawing because the surface have been treated so that it encourage or discourage fogging. And the light is very important so that it can get into the drops and that you can see the drawing. Okay. So when you see this installation, you can see the water plant under the rain, but you see also at the same time the little drops on the sun light in the morning on the morning leaves, and you can see also maybe at the same time this fog that you see on your window when it's cold outside, or on your mirror when you have taken a bath or a shower, and on which you are doing some drawings with your fingertips. So it's let you come back lots of memories. And very often, water is used to speak about the memories and the passing of the time. And this installation, in a sense, is a try an attempt to keep the time and to keep the memories with all their fragilities, even if from time to time the bigger drop detach and roll over. Here, another way of using the power of water It's a bilayer, a paper bilayer, and I have tried lots of different configurations so that I can have different shape of movement. And so all the different systems have different behaviors according to their structure. It looks a little bit like a living system, a plant, and it is not surprising because the bilayer is a biomimicry. We know how to do bilayers by looking at the pine cones, which open or close depending on the humidity of the air. Some artists are working at the interface between art and architecture. This is the case of Aki Menges, who is using here the same principle of opening and closing with the air humidity, with here these wood slides. And he put some of them on his buildings, so that when it's sunny outside, it's open, and when it's raining, it closes. There is another responsive architecture here by Philippe Bisley, Hylozoic soil. You can enter in the responsive structure, and there are some sensitive endings which are moving when you are close to them. So they retract or open, but not only the sensitive structure close to it, when they are moving, they make the whole structure moving at the same time as a complex system. So it's very impressive when you are inside. It's really like a big living element. In fact, the Hylozoic soil make reference to a theoretical philosophy, Hylozoism, where the objects are alive and little object belongs to bigger object alive also, which themselves belongs to larger object alive again, and so on and so on. And the whole world is also alive and animated by a vital force. Here there is a structure by Sachiko Kodama, which is made with ferromagnetic fluids. It is a moving sculpture, and what we can see is very strange because we are not used to that kind of movement. And again, we really have the sentiment that the thing is alive because the peaks are getting bigger and slower in a strange way that we don't understand. This piece of art is very interesting because, as you can see, there is a coin in levitation and just oscillating a little bit, hesitating between heads and tails. And so what we can see is as if the time was stopped, trying not to become some past, but not going to the future, just staying at that moment, very strange moment, elongated time, and with really the idea of the uncertainty. What are we going to be after? What is going to happen to us? We don't know yet at the moment. And it's very interesting because this uncertainty, in fact, is something that is important in quantum mechanics, and the superconductor which is used in this piece of art to make the coin levitate is really directed by the quantum mechanics and with the uncertainty principle. So it's really something which is mixed in between the science and the art. In fact, Nelson Goodman, a philosopher who was also an art critic, told us that the metaphor and the analogy we can have help us to understand the world around us, and the artwork can help us to enrich that analogy and metaphors. Here you can see little droplets inside bigger drops, but you can see maybe also at the same time just the beginning of life. And so what is interesting is that it's not mental metaphor, but it's really embodied metaphor inside the matter, so that your, the experience of your body is really a way of getting to different concepts and analyzing them in a different way. Here you can see traffic. It's some droplets in water. It's presented as you could see the matter in action, as if it were a movie. And these little droplets are getting around in the small canals, which has the thickness of one hair. It's very small. It's like a microcosm, but I enlarge the image to project it on the wall in very big scale, so that we can see that there are some operation of these little droplets. They can be divided, or they can fusion, or they can be included in other droplets. And it's very the shape of the design which make them this different operation. It's because of the shape of the structure that the operations are different. So it's really what I want to say is that in material, it's the structure, the internal structure that make the properties. And here, what I like also is that the fact that the droplets are very regular in shape and in their speed, very regular speed. It's finally a digital system, because all the droplets are like digital units. So the wool is just between the analogic and the digital. Nowadays, we can say that the new materials are changing the status, because they are getting closer and closer to living matter. It's an artificial life or matter which is hybridized to life, a materialist work to creation. So scientists know how to make some artificial blood, some artificial skins, and so on. So it's a very sophisticated matter, which becoming the interface between the life and the lifeless. It's becoming an interface which is beginning thinner and thinner, very fragile, like a simple skin. And I will end with this art of work of Jalila Essaidi, where you can see here work she has done with scientists to make in vitro human skin, which is reinforced with spider silk coming from a transgenic organism to stop the speeding bullet. In fact, in our Heidi, we are subjected to the violence in the news, and this changed our idea of safety, and maybe we are really sensitive to the danger, and maybe the society can take quite irrational response to that fear. So she wants to explore the social and ethical issue which is surrounding safety in our technological world. Thank you very much for your attention.
My question, do you apply in your art also all your physics and chemistry knowledge?
Knowledge?
Okay. And
yes.
Now you teach this or not? You change work, in fact, huh?
You
change your work. Before
yes.
You was a scientist.
Yes, yeah. Of course. Yes, I used it a lot. You have seen hydrophily, this fogging structure. I had to know what was hydrophilic and hydrophobic systems. And I went to meet Daniel Bessens, who is a specialist of that kind of systems. And it's really useful to know how the laboratory are working so that I can meet people more easily. And I work also on this microfluidic system you have seen, TRAFFIC.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, the laboratories are quite complex, and if you are not used to them, because when I come to see the laboratories, the director of the laboratory is very welcoming because it's nice for him to make some communication. But when you have to work, people don't have a lot of time to work with you. So they let you make your things. So if you are a little bit used to that kind of practice, it helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now we can. Okay, sorry, please.
Of course, art has many interactions with science, engineering, philosophy, perhaps. Usually, in science and in engineering, people try to make something new, to discover something new, or create something new, or have new knowledge. Is there such a concept in art? Can we say that by doing art, we get some more knowledge about something? You know?
Yes, I'm sure we. Maybe not the same kind of knowledge, but I had told you with Nelson Goodman, maybe artists can create some images. I mean, some mental images that can help you to understand things. And especially it's very important nowadays, as I tried to say at the end of the talk, because they are very technological production, which are really interesting, but that can be dangerous, as it has been said with nanoparticles, or others, nanorobots in your body, or artificial everything. You know about this transhumanism movement, of this idea also of changing our body. Lots of things can be dangerous, and we have to think about them. So we have to create, maybe the artist can help people to go to this knowledge in a different way so that they can think it. And think it is very difficult when it's nanoparticles, we cannot think very easily. So having that kind of work make us think about it.
Stimulate people to think about it.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there is another question,
please. You have nicely shown how the border between artificial life and it's getting smaller by using self-adaptive materials, yes. But the big step to life is still to go to self-reflective systems. What's in this context, and also what you mentioned in the last sentence, what's your opinion about artificial, not only life, also intelligence in art? Is this a topic?
Yes, of course, it's a topic. Everything which is interesting is a topic for art. Of course, lots of artists have done some work about artificial brain and artificial thinking. I think now what is going to be the subject is the fact that these kind of systems are connected to maybe real brain cells and things like that. And what is strange and make us react in the ethical point of view, I think it's very a subject for the artists. And also because at the philosophical level, it's really important to see where is our point. Do we really think that we are going to reach a more intelligent system for the computers or for robots? Or do we think that the living is something that we will never be able to reach? For example, the protocells. It's how to study how the cells that we construct, we build, can become living cells, and what is the limit between both of them. There are some artists who are working on that subject, Oh, yeah, I'm working on protocells also, but there is also an artist who is working with cells that you can see in a tunneling microscope just before it's a living cell and after it's dead. It's a dead cell, which is the limit between a living cell and the dead cell. Do you see it on the tunneling microscope? Well, it's all that question which arise. In fact, there is a definition for the cell of what is a living cell and what is not a living cell. There are 3 components. Maybe you know, I don't know, but it has to be a closed system so that you have an inside and an outside. And it has to have a metabolism so that it's taking things outside to put them inside and to use them to evaluate. And there have to be some information inside them so that it can become a daughter cell with the same information in it. So people are working at the moment to see if they can do and they can have all these 3 points, but by making them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.